I think we were 7:30. Sorry about
that. Okay, no problem at all, Anthony. Okay, so I think we're core now, so we will start the meeting. I'm Councillor Julian Saunders. I'm the Vice Chair of the committee. The Chair has had to give his apologies tonight, so I will be chairing the meeting. Do we have any other apologies, Town Clerk?
Yes, so we've got them from Councillors Thomas, Williams and Barker. Okay,
thank you. So the next item is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that any member of the committee wants to make? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So let's move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask you to agree these previous minutes? Would someone like to propose that they're agreed? So, okay, I've got Councillor Hook proposing, and you're seconding, Councillor Jackson. Okay, thank you. So, are there any matters arising that any member of the committee wants to raise on the minutes? I think most of the items here are actually on the agenda, but if there is anything specific. Okay, I will take that as the not being any items, which means we can move on to item 4, which is to receive reports from the 20-mile-an-hour stand that we've been running at weekends. So I think this item is really an opportunity for anyone to give updates on how the stall has been going. Certainly I think attended most of the stalls, and I think it's fair to say we've had a positive reaction from the public. I would say probably about 3/4 of people who've come up to the stand have felt very positive about the scheme and have requested, in many cases they've requested further publicity to take away, like bin stickers and posters. There have been people who are less positive about the scheme, but I think generally people who are councillors and others who've been on the stand have been able to have a constructive dialogue over the scheme. And I think the main public concern that's been presented on the stand has been the issue of compliance and enforcement, which is certainly something we can probably pick up later in the agenda. Do any other councillors want to comment on what's happened on the stall? Councillor Hook.
I agree with you, Julian. Sometimes I would say it was very positive. Having the bin stickers, particularly to give away, was very good, and lots of them were taken. And also having commonplace was good on the TV screen in the middle of the stand, because a lot of people had comments about the enforcement, as you said, and also this or that location and whether certain things could be done. And it was great to be able to sort of show them the screen with commonplace, and that you can go on the website and leave a comment, and people seem to really like that aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from councillors? I mean, Councillor Jackson, you've been a very good supporter of the stand.
Yes, I have, Julian. Basically, I agree with what Councillor Hook said and what you've said. I mean, the main concern that I find is people saying that it's not being enforced enough. And the bicycles are a great concern as well, because the bicycles are going the wrong way through the town. and they are actually, somebody said, I'm sure they're going more than 20 miles an hour. Now, I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's another issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think this is an information item. I don't think there's probably anything else we need to add at this stage on the item. So I suggest we move to item 5, which is an update on publicity materials, which I can give. Sorry, you're going to get fairly tired of hearing my voice through this meeting in the absence of Councillor Thomas. As I think members of the committee will know, we've been working very closely with Kent County Council in terms of the production of publicity materials, and we previously we've had posters and bin stickers, and we've obviously had the newsletter which went to every household in the town. Over the last month, we've had some banners produced, which are now displayed at various locations around the town. I gather some, are they metal posters, Town Clerk, have arrived today, which are going to go in the car parks, thanking for people for observing the 20-mile-an-hour limit. And we have some postcard size flyers to give out to people, reminding them about the KCC consultation, which is running until the beginning of March. In addition to that, and I think this is the only publicity that so far we've paid for ourselves, we're getting some more bin stickers produced. They're going to be A4 size, because the ones we've got at the moment have almost all been taken by members of the public. And I'm going to ask the Town Clerk now if I've missed out any other publicity that we're due to have.
Only that A5 pledge that we're going to hopefully have ready. We just need confirmation on the final wording for that, so we can get it printed ready for Saturday.
Fine, okay. Well, I'm sure we can resolve that even possibly after the meeting.
I can just report that the new bin stickers have arrived today as well.
Yeah. Okay. Chris Oswald-jones, you want to speak?
Very briefly on the revelation that the new supply of bin stickers will be A4 as opposed to A3. That's good, because the medium-sized bins that swell, the green bins, the smaller size to what the lot 240s are now 180 litre with a curvy sort of front. The A4 should fit within the curves much better. Okay,
excellent. It's also considerably cheaper to get standard A4 size stickers as well, which is good. The other thing I think it's just worth mentioning is that we had a 2-page spread in the Town Council newsletter, so I think we should thank the Economic Development Officer for that. Okay, is there anything else on publicity materials? Okay, I'll move on to item 6. I was going to, with the agreement of the committee, suggest that we combined item 6 and 7, and because I think they're very closely linked in together. Are you happy with that? One thing I think we didn't mention it, although we took apologies for the meeting, one thing we didn't mention at the beginning of the meeting is that Adrian Berrant, the consultant who's been supporting us with the project, is actually on holiday this week, so he's had to give his apologies as well. So I'll speak to the community engagement subgroup. update first. I think the key thing for members of the committee to note is that the community engagement subgroup agreed a communications plan at its last meeting for the period up until the end of the Kent County Council consultation. And you will have received a copy of that earlier in the week, which hopefully you've had the chance to have a look at. Basically, what the subgroup has agreed is that it's important to go on engaging with the community in the next 5 months before the consultation finishes, in order to encourage people to take part in the consultation. So you'll see in the community engagement plan that we're proposing to carry on with market stalls on Saturdays, that we're going to email and communicate with people who are likely to support the scheme, and particularly people who are perhaps supporters but quite passively supporting the scheme. We're going to contact businesses that have in the past been positive supporters of the scheme. We're going to run a virtual cycle fest over the next few months, and that part of that will be aiming to engage cyclists and potential cyclists in the town and get their views on how the scheme, the 20 mile an hour scheme, can develop. And we're going to be contacting and talking to schools regularly and linking that activity to some of the national publicity weeks that are coming up, like Road Safety Week and Walk to School Week and Cycle to School Week. We're also asking individual town councillors and other members of the public to help us distribute stickers and posters. We're going to carry on obviously using Commonplace as a way of gathering information about people's views of how we can make local streets safer and encourage walking and cycling. And we have got a number of webinars now planned, one probably for members of, specifically for members of the Faversham Society, and one for aimed at parents, which will be talking about how it can be made easier for their children to walk or cycle to school. So those things are all in the plan. So I think probably the best thing now is if I open it up to questions or comments, and then I'm hoping that as a committee we can endorse this plan and let the project management team, which is the chair, me as the vice chair, the town clerk and Adrian Berrant, carry on with the actions that are in the plan. So are there any questions or contributions that people want to make? Chris Oswald-jones.
Just clarification, thank you, Julian. On the subgroup update and then next steps, line 1, KCC 6-month consultation on the experimental order runs until, is typed as 1st of February, but since that was produced, KCC amended their traffic regulation order, and as you mentioned earlier, the 1st of March is the effective end of consultation now.
Okay, thank you. And I think we hopefully when we confirm that, everyone will be happy to agree to that change. So I've got Councillor Jackson, and then I've got Amanda Russell to come in.
Mine roughly was what Chris was just said, but I also want to say I have noted there has been a slowing down of traffic in Lower Road. Not an awful lot, but they are going slower, which I think is a very good thing. Concerns me the cycling to school, which I think is a great idea if they use the road. But the pavements, I think we must stress, are a no-go, because I really am concerned for pedestrians on the pavements with bicycles.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. Amanda.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where my the work that I'm doing fits in with the project management group, because obviously I've got to make sure that I coordinate properly, because the filming, so next week on Wednesday I'm filming with Break, the road safety charity, and that's a film that will go that will be aimed at schools for Road Safety Week and school children. And there's a range of resources that are designed to be provided to schools so that they can you can engage children and parents in various ways. So that would save you having to create those materials, and you should probably try and make use of those. So we need to make sure that that's coordinated. The other thing I was going to say is that the BBC did a radio segment last week, and I was asked to I was interviewed by Joe Byrne, who's the East Kent reporter, and they did some vox pops. They went around the town, did some vox pops. When I was sent a link to the report and I listened to all of it, I wasn't at all impressed, because they had it was sort of a very confusing report that conflated the closure of the market square with the trial, with putting in cycle lanes, which we don't actually, we're not actually putting any cycle lanes at this stage. And it was, they also interviewed somebody from I Am Road Smart, which is the Institute of Advanced Motorists, as though he were sort of Phil Jones type person, talking about elements of our scheme which weren't elements of our scheme. They were elements of the Tunbridge Wells scheme. So I listened to all of it, and I wrote to Alex Bish, who's the editor at the BBC, and he phoned me yesterday and he's apologised. He's gone back and listened to the whole report, and he's agreed that they didn't do a very good job. And what he wants to do as part of his apology is to come back, send Joe Burns back. He wants to do a proper in-depth report just on the Faversham 20-mile-an-hour scheme, so just that by itself. And he wants to interview me, or he wants Joe to interview me, and he also wants Phil Jones to interview Phil Jones as well, so that he can talk about the more sort of specific technical interventions that are unique to this scheme. So I thought that was really positive, but I said that I would obviously raise it at this committee meeting, and just sort of make sure that I go through the official channels with it. So that also has to be fed into whatever it is that is going on with you and Eddie and Adrian. So I don't know if I need to become a formal member of this project management group, or if I just feed things in as they happen. I don't know what you think, Julian, or anyone.
Okay, shall I respond to that? The way we're operating is we're just having a kind of weekly kind of action meeting, really, to see where we've got on the project. In relation to the break work, I think it might be helpful if I chair the meeting on the Wednesday, if either tomorrow or in the next 2 or 3 days, if I could have a conversation with you and get totally up to speed with what you're doing, and then I can feed that back into the catch-up meeting we're having on Wednesday. I think that might be a good way forward. In terms of the BBC wanting to do an item, that sounds really exciting, actually, and good. And so thank you, Amanda, for getting on the BBC's back and kind of pointing out to them that they haven't done things right. I guess as a town council, what we could do is to say that if they do want to interview the town council, I would imagine that Eddie, as the chair, would be very happy to be interviewed with them. And in fact, I know when they were originally considering the programme, you know, Eddie did say he would make himself available if they wanted to interview him. And I know KCC were very disappointed at the item as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because there's been a lot of stuff in the news recently because the Active Travel Academy has actually drafted media reporting guidelines because they're saying that that it's actually affecting. It has the power to affect not only the way that people will, the decisions that people will make when they are consulted on these speed limits, but it also can actually serve to make our streets more dangerous. And because obviously it affects the way that people vote, it affects the decisions that they make, and it affects their perception. And one of the big perceptions is around cyclists, which I know Carol's just touched on. And I don't like people cycling on pavements, but I think, and I don't, you know, I've heard these arguments about cyclists speeding as well, but the report was also very negative about cyclists and cycle lanes. And that's very irresponsible. And I just think this is something that it's kind of exhausting, but it's a kind of process of education with a lot of journalists. And I noticed in the minutes of the 2020 subcommittee meeting, it says challenge the poor Faversham news item. Was that more of the same? Because I wasn't aware of that.
There was an item. It wasn't the last item about the scheme. It was the previous one, and it suggested, that the decision to introduce the experimental scheme through an experimental order. I think it used the word bizarre as a description, which clearly we would strongly disagree with.
It's a value judgment. They're not meant to make value judgments.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other slightly amusing thing really was that the article also suggested that I was a woman. It reported that she had said this, which was quite funny, and it did kind of slightly reflect that the article, I think had been put together at very short notice, by people who didn't really know much about the campaign and the role of the town council. Chris Oswald-jones, you want to come in? I'll come back. I'll come back on a couple. No, sorry. I think I did give answers to the things you raised, Amanda. But so Chris Oswald-jones, come in, and then we need to make some decisions on this item as well.
Thank you, Julian. Yes, whilst Amanda is there at the same time, I thought I would come in now. I was going to come in later. A general observation: Faversham News over the last 6 months, at least, if not a year, have been putting various journalists have been writing their own reports, non-Faversham based. I noticed Katie Davis, our local scribe, hasn't been apparently very active in print. I don't know what she's up to at the moment, but there are 4 or 5 journalists who are Thanet, Herne Bay, Whitstable, Canterbury based, and the information they put in their articles, conflating this, that and the other, putting in judgment comments rather than pure journalism, is not being good from that particular medium. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Amanda, do you want to come back in?
I mean, I think sometimes it's what Julian was saying, it's just things have to be done really quickly, a 24-hour news cycle. They don't have local journalists. Jo Byrne at the BBC covers all of East Kent, and she'd lumped Tunbridge Wells in and Faversham in together. So a lot of the time it's just a process of educating, but that is time and work, and we have to keep repeating ourselves. But hopefully these guidelines from the Active Travel Academy should help, just with the general kind of language that's used to talk about road safety, road death, cycling. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed, people talk a lot about cyclists being really dangerous, and 60%, something like 60% coverage of cyclists is broadly negative in the press. But studies show that cyclists are generally way more law-abiding than motorists. So it's challenging those untruths, I think, or those misconceptions. And obviously, we've got a unique situation here because we're the first town-wide limit. We're going with a 20-mile-an-hour limit. We're not in a position where we can put cycle lanes everywhere anyway. So we just need to make sure that I coordinate with the town council and I keep you up to date with anything that I become aware of, where the story is being distorted, or where somebody isn't applying best practice. And I think that's really important, especially in the consultation period, because that does affect how people will vote. One thing I was going to say as well is that I have been challenging some of the Facebook posts more recently lately, just because again there's been a lot of inaccuracy, and I feel that where there's sort of mistruths being disseminated, it's really important to nip that in the bud. And another thing I've noticed is that every time I have that kind of debate, every time I comment, somebody likes our 20's Plenty Facebook page. So they may not comment they don't want to get into the debate, and they don't want to deal with a keyboard warrior, but they go straight to the 20's Plenty Facebook page and they like it, which means we've got more people that are hopefully clicking through to the consultation, or at least looking at the consultation, looking at Facebook and engaging. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And our likes, the number of people liking our page has risen a lot since I started doing that.
That's good. I mean, the way the Facebook
Anthony, come in.
The way that's really good to hear, and it's partly because the way the Facebook algorithm works is the more engagement in terms of likes or comments of any type, whether negative or positive, that a post or a subject gets, it will show it to more people. So when you get your Facebook newsfeed, which Facebook constructs from all your friends and the pages you like, blah, 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 it will favour things that have had a lot of engagement, even if they're negative comments. And Facebook will also recognise things. So it will tie together 20's Plenty posts on the town council Facebook page or other people's Facebook pages to the actual 20's Plenty Facebook page itself. So in a way, when the people come on making negative comments, and they don't worry me too much because it tends to be the same old people saying the same old things, and they are so different to the response we're getting on the stand. They're just doing us a favour fundamentally by driving up the engagement, which means the algorithm will show it to more people.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Were you wanted to come in again, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to agree actually, and say that it's also an opportunity to kind of air the truth, isn't it? Because it gives you a chance to rebut what they say. So then suddenly you've got that platform again, and there are lots of people who quietly come up to me and will say, "Oh, it was really good what you said," and again we'll go avoid that page, but we'll go and do something constructive on our page and comment there. So yeah, it's just interesting that we've got these silent allies coming out now, which is good.
Okay, it's probably worth me emphasising that in the community engagement group, although we agreed that we would be doing regular Facebook posts through the town council page, and we'd be producing regular mailings from Commonplace. We did agree that our prime focus was to communicate with the public about how the scheme could be improved and how we can make streets safer and better for cycling and walking. And we asked that that we asked Adrian to focus on that kind of communication rather than having to spend too much time rebutting comments, negative and, as you say, often unreliable and untruthful comments that are made on social media. So any other work that people are doing, like you, Amanda, is absolutely fantastic and very helpful to us in moving the campaign forward. And certainly, you know, the response, I think my understanding is that, you know, the responses that are coming through in the consultation are starting to be more positive as people get familiar with the scheme. So I think there's, you know, as people start to experience something, they're more likely to be happy and you know, positive about it. So yeah, so we've got there are two decisions I think we really need to make here in the or two things we need to endorse. In the community engagement plan, we've identified that we're going to run a market stall every Saturday for a period initially through to mid-October, but probably beyond that, and that a lot of that will be focused on talking to people about the consultation and encouraging them to take part in the consultation. So can I confirm with members of the committee that you're happy with that approach, that we do focus on having a regular stand and focus it around supporting the consultation?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, Councillor Hook, as another voting member, are you happy with that?
When we say supporting the consultation, you mean telling people about it, encouraging them to?
Yeah, and obviously explaining why the town council believes that you know, the public should support the scheme being made permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the other thing we need to make, just endorse is: are you happy to sign off the communications plan with the amendment that Chris Oswald-jones made, that we make it a plan that runs to the beginning of March 2021?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Hook, are you happy with that? Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is an update on the highway works, which Eddie Thomas was going to do. Basically, most of the highway works are done, and obviously the scheme is live now. I understand that there might be some small things like moving around planters that are still to happen, and the thing that I think has been fed back most to KCC, which hasn't happened, is that they haven't taken all the 30-mile-an-hour signs down, and they haven't taken other signs which relate to the previous speed limits. Jamie Watson, the scheme manager, said that he would get this sorted out. I mean, I think he's frustrated by their contractors' slowness in taking these signs down. So I would hope that all these signs will be taken down in the next few days. Chris Oswald-jones.
Yes, we were in conversation with Eddie, and also Hannah Perkin was there yesterday, and Eddie confirmed that that was on the cards fairly quickly. I asked whether the signs were going to be bagged over to save the cost of taking them down, and hopefully not, but the possibility that the scheme would fold after the 6-month consultation. It was planned for the signs to be removed.
Yeah, that's my understanding, that they'll be
so watch those spaces.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other comments or questions in relation to the highway works?
If they're not down, because I emailed Jamie about the Tanner Street one this week, and he was already aware of it. Maybe if they're not down another couple of weeks, we could ask how they feel about us finding a man who can, which may or may not be Chris, or the CAN facilities manager actually, and just doing it. They'll
Well,
say you need to have insurance, but Adam Andrews has insurance, I think.
I think that might be a good idea if there is a continued delay. Chris Oswald-Jones.
Very briefly, the Tanner Street one has had a vehicle impact. We need, highways need UK Power Networks to disconnect. It's a illuminated pole, the one that's bent over. It has a 30 sign on it, but it's a powered pole, so we're waiting on that probably.
Okay, has that been reported to Casey?
Oh yes, yes.
No, good.
On the day, Tim Stoner witnessed and the event.
Fine, okay, that's great. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 9, which is review of the budget for 2021 and an initial discussion on the budget for next financial year. Town Clerk, are you able to give us an update on where we are with the budget?
Yes, I can. We budgeted 28,000 for this year, and we have spent approximately 14,000 of that. That would be £6,000 on the Commonplace app, 2,250 to Berent Consulting, and approximately 5,500 to PJA. So we have 50% of our budget for this year left.
Okay. I should, under item 7, have asked you to endorse continuing with Adrian Berent's contract to support the project, which is an additional expenditure that the chair and me as the vice chair are proposing. I think we propose that Adrian Berent might do up to an additional 20 days work with us, Town Clerk, haven't we? So are you happy to endorse that we extend Adrian Berent's contract?
Very happy.
Good, okay. Councillor Jackson, are you happy with that as well? You're muted, I'm afraid.
I'm happy for it to continue, but I'd like to know how much that would take from the budget.
Are you able to provide that information, Town Clerk?
I believe that was another 5,000.
Yeah, that would be my understanding.
Right.
So I, to be honest, I think for the experience and quality of work that we're being provided with, that is definitely very good value for money for the town council. And I think it will. I think the experience of the consultant is helping us with some other aspects of town council work that we might want to move on with, like improving walking and cycling in the future. So I think it does provide us with good value.
Yeah, that's fine then.
Thank you. So we also have got the possibility of discussing, starting to discuss the budget for next year. I'll just make a couple of comments in relation to this. I think it's a bit early for us to have detailed discussions, but obviously the scheme we've got at the moment is not the full scheme that was designed by Phil Jones. And it doesn't have any of the physical build outs that were planned. The gateways are a lot simpler than what was planned in the original project. Some of the ideas about encouraging walking, the kind of cross town route, which was going to be highlighted in the original design, that it hasn't been possible to include that. At this stage, we've got no real understanding whether Kent County Council will be able to put further funding into the scheme next year, and I don't think they would have any understanding of that. So I think it's reasonable to, I think it's reasonable to assume that we will want to enhance the scheme, and that's starting to come through in some of the feedback we we're getting from the public through Commonplace. So I think it's reasonable to assume that next financial year we will want to have a significant 20's plenty budget, probably mainly to use on physical interventions to improve the scheme and encourage compliance. So I think in broad terms, our approach as a committee in relation to the budget should be one of, with any money that's not spent this year, arguing to the rest of the town council that that money should be carried over for physical interventions in the future. And I think secondly, arguing to the rest of the town council that it does need to have a substantial 20's plenty budget for next year in order to allow enhancements to take place. I mean, we may get support from KCC, we may get support from Swale. There could be further central government funding, but at this stage, none of those things are clearly identified. So I think we need to argue that we do have a significant budget. So that's my view. Do other members of the committee have views about this year's budget or the future budget for the 20 mile an hour scheme?
I mean, I hope we would definitely be able to keep in the amount we had in budget this current year, the same amount next year. And if there's any left unspent, I hope we'll be able to persuade the council to roll it forward. And I would expect the whole council would agree with that. And we'll need to ascertain what we can expect for KCC next year. KCC's budget is usually done in February. So we'll know definitely by then, but hopefully they'll give us an idea somewhat before that. KCC's budget is under real stress. They've got to find 160 million because of things they spent money on for COVID that they haven't had back from central government yet. So I guess our starting point would probably be to ask Jamie and for him to feed it up the chain of command there as to whether they can expect to give us some money. I suppose it also depends in part whether there's an active travel fund next year. But to go to the question, the key question of the town council, I'd certainly think they budget the same amount again. And if we think we need more, I would have thought our colleagues, Judy and Carol, I would have thought our colleagues would agree to that if we can put together what it's needed for.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I've got Amanda and then Chris. Amanda.
I just wondered if there was, I mean, the second tranche funding from the Department for Transport. What's the position on that? Because I haven't heard anything more about that. Did we qualify for any of the second round funding as a scheme? Okay,
my understanding is that the KCC proposal didn't have additional funding for our scheme. The results of the tendering round, the bidding round, haven't come out yet. I think that there's been some delays in government making decisions. I understand from Adrian that's partly because some of the schemes they funded in round one were perhaps rather rushed, and therefore they've had, in some cases they've had a poor reaction from the public. So I think that DFT are taking their time in assessing the proposals that were made in tranche two. But it may be, if some of the ideas that KCC have put into tranche two don't look quite as good as ideas as they were, that there could be a possibility, if they get the funding, that we might perhaps attract some of that funding for our scheme. And certainly that we'll be kind of looking to encourage Jamie and Nicola, his boss, to consider our scheme for more funding, because I think they can be assured that there's a good level of public support for our scheme, and it shouldn't be controversial to spend more money on making it better.
Yeah, I remember there was some kind of discussion with KCC who felt that just the sheer act of lowering the speed limit wasn't enough of an intervention to promote cycling. So they didn't use, I suppose they didn't promote perhaps that aspect of the scheme as much as they should have done, which is a shame. Can I also just ask about the removal of the centre lines? Is that something that's happening within this round of implementation, or is it something for the next phase?
Now, I can't give you a full answer on that. I've got a feeling that Jamie was still planning to try and do some removal of centre lines, but I'm not sure what the timescales of that are. So I think the most sensible thing is I'll kind of drop him a note and check what's happening with that, Amanda, rather than trying to remember exactly what he was saying. But I think certainly the intention has always been to remove centre lines, and that would be quite an easy thing to do at a next stage, although it's apparently a bit more complicated than we might, as lay people, think.
And I suppose my only concern about funding would be to ensure that it goes to the interventions that were signed off in the original plan with KCC last year, so that we don't try and reinvent Phil's work at any point.
No, I think one of the things, when Adrian gets back from holiday, we're going to start to review the feedback we're getting from Commonplace, and also to slightly refocus how we're using Commonplace, and to try and get more feedback on the kind of interventions that were in the original proposal, and ask the public what their views are on that. So I don't think we'd be drifting away from the original scheme, but there may be additional things that have come out quite strongly on Commonplace that perhaps hadn't been thought about,
which was always,
and are about broader cycling and walking things rather than the core of the 20-mile-an-hour scheme.
Yeah, which was always the plan, I think. But I think the whole point about Phil Jones was that he was the only person with that sort of holistic understanding of how you create a road network or a street network that works across all of those street users. And I guess that was why he was the person that we turned to, because that's his specialism. And there are only two people in the country that do that, and I think the other one is Andrew Cameron. And it was that I suppose that's my concern, is that if we suddenly bring in elements that are come from a slightly different discipline, then we run the risk of having a scheme where we've got these elements that are working against one another, and that's something that I would be quite cautious about, because that was one of the things that came out of that BBC news report, was that Tunbridge had ended up with a cycling lane that led people to a car wash and things like that, which wouldn't necessarily happen here because it's much smaller. But I can see how, if you haven't got somebody who understands how cyclists, motorists, pedestrians, has that really kind of forensic technical knowledge about how you make all of those things function holistically, I can see how you can have things. And again, I also would, in recent years, putting cyclists onto pavements and having cyclists a cycle lane on pavements is being people are moving away from that and going in a completely different direction, because it's now seen as being unfair, and that there's something like 90% of the road network taken up by vehicles and 10% by pedestrians. So we shouldn't put cyclists on that small 10% that the pedestrians have. We should be pushing back against motor vehicles. And it's just that, I think that's just what I'm concerned about. And obviously I'm going to do my best to stay as engaged as I can to keep things on track, and I'm sure Tim will, but that would be my concern.
Okay, I think those are helpful comments. I think if we are in a position to have further physical interventions, none of us are transport planners, and I think we would need to get the support of a planner, and clearly we've got we've
have the best
designed our scheme, so it would probably be sensible to carry on working with him. Chris, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Julian.
Yes.
Two things. Following on, Amanda, the removal of the centre white lines. It's my understanding, with Eddie, that this is on the cards a little at a time, phased in, as and when Jamie Watson can get liaison with the, I was going to say white lining team, the burning off team. And the obvious starting point, I could suggest, if you're speaking to Jamie Watson, would be Oswald-jones Road. Up the middle there. Burning off, the removal of the white lines.
Yeah, my understanding is that Oswald-jones Road was one of the roads that it was being,
yeah, one of, but that'd be a good starter.
Yeah.
Good first off. Going back to the budget, we've spoken about central government, we've spoken about KCC. Julian and Carol, you'll be both up to speed with Swale. And the town council starts, I think, in sort of November, December, working out budget. KCC, I think you mentioned February, but Swale are very early. I think you're already starting with the policy review and then scrutiny and then the cabinet and finally into next year, the full council. But Swale are already starting to formulate the ground plans for budget. I believe you'll be up to speed on that, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, the finance director is starting to work on the budget and is very concerned to tell the council that it won't be possible to spend more, and that I think the financial situation for district councils, the money they get from central government, the prognosis isn't very positive for next year. I mean, Swale has come through this period, is probably in a better position than a lot of other district councils for various reasons I won't go into. But the budget for next year has always been a concern, because there is due to be a change in the funding formula that central government uses. So although Swale are very supportive of the scheme, I think it would be unwise for us to assume that they're going to provide financial support for it at this stage. Okay, have we got any other input? No? Okay. So I think that's as much as we can do really in relation to that item. We probably will need, Town Clerk, will we be needing to discuss this in more detail in November, or will it wait until December? When will you need the committee to?
December will be fine, but we'll probably have a workshop early December as a full council. But January is the final date for agreement. So we have a little bit of time at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got item 10 as any other business. Is there any other business that any member of the committee wanted to raise? Chris and then Amanda.
Thank you, Julian. Earlier on, Carol was mentioning that she's getting feedback from the public, and the bottom line always is on the 20's limit is enforcement. I'll just raise the comment that we've got, as far as the conception of the idea, the installation is now in the future. We have monitoring, and in the far distant future, the possibility of enforcement. Monitoring will be carried out, not immediately, partially by Faversham Group Speedwatch. I'm in liaison with Alan Watson, the Kent-wide police Speedwatch officer. What we first have to do is to get all our accredited approved sites changed from being a 30 logged site to, they all now will be 20. The only previous 20 was Tanner Street. They're all now have to be noted as being 20, so they have to do their admin bit, which will take a few weeks. We won't be speed watching until probably well into or late of this experimental, so March, April, May, probably 2021. Enforcement, that's nothing to do with that, the police matter. The police will pick up what we monitor. The police will, if they're about, monitor excessive speeding wherever, but they're unlikely to be monitoring 20 mile an hour conformity. That's my view, my impression.
Which I think is a shame, because a lot of people will think, well, then if nobody else is going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I really am disappointed that if that is the police's attitude. In actual fact, I watched a police car speeding up here tonight, and he was well over 20, and that was a police car.
Yeah.
And he wasn't doing an emergency because he came back about 5 minutes later.
Your earlier comment, though, was a lot of people, particularly in Lower Road, you observe, I've observed, and one or two others have, that around the town, people are going slower, generally. I mean, you get
They are going slow.
But the one in front going at 18 mile an hour, no one else can do more. They're stacked up behind.
I think the question, when it's asked of us, how is this going to be enforced? The line that I've took is like, it's like seatbelts. Years ago, none of us wore seatbelts. Yeah. And then slowly, as our people began to get fined, etc., we all began to put our seatbelts on. So I think for some people, and there are some people who are adhering to it, a lot are, but there are others who are not and will not. And I think there needs to be a little bit of a deterrent for those people.
Okay, we won't get into a big, because it's an interesting topic. I think at this stage, I suppose, again, at the community engagement group, we agreed that the top priority was compliance, finding ways of encouraging people to slow down. I mean, I have been slightly disappointed at because the police did promise that they would try and visit our stand and support us, and so far they haven't done that. So I think we do need to go back to them and ask if they can show a bit more of a visual presence to support the scheme in the next few weeks. Okay, Amanda.
Yeah, I was just going to say, has any of the communications, we haven't really touched on emerging technologies, new technology, and how speed limiting technology in 2022, I think it is coming in. So every single new vehicle will be fitted with speed limited technology. So if your car will automatically register 20 mile an hour limit, and if you choose to override it and then have an accident, then you've been seen to willfully break the speed limit, which will place you legally, as I'm sure Anthony knows way more about than I do, in a very different position than if you were speeding before that. So that's probably something, and I know that Adrian knows all about that, so that's probably something that you can start to work in subtly into communications, which will help with the naysayers, I think. I've noticed on my road, just anecdotally, it has made a difference. It seems to be certain times of the day, school run, I think not so much, but I find just after, and traffic more generally outside of rush times, people are observing it. One of the things I've also was going to ask you about, and perhaps this is something Louise and I should discuss, because we've had some correspondence this week about how we access the mailing list of the 20's Plenty campaign supporters. And we're going to work on a post that I send out to them. But something I've noticed is the business vehicles that go past. So I won't name names here because I think that's fair, but there are people who are clearly observing the speed limit, and they have their business logos on the side of their van, so I know who they are. And then there are people who clearly aren't. I wonder if it's worth me sitting down one day and just sitting for an hour and just noting down all the vehicles that go past my door, and we just send a blanket mailing to them, asking them, just communicating a bit about the speed limit in an attempt to sort of engage them and explain to them how it works, why it works, and how keep it in people's minds so that it continues to work. I don't know if that's helpful.
That sounds like a good idea. I think the town council, I'm sure, could write to these businesses and say that residents have been feeding back to us that it was particularly their vans that seemed to not be observing the limit.
Yeah.
I think that would be that kind of moral pressure does influence people.
Yeah, because these are the professional drivers, and I think if you get the professional, and also a pat on the back for the ones that clearly are, which I think is important as well. And perhaps we could champion the ones that are. And I think that, because that could be pretty, I think that's really important, because some people are just doing it. It's interesting, some people just do it and they just get it and they think it's the right thing to do, and they can see the benefits of it. So yeah, that was something that occurred to me this week. I did also get knocked down. I nearly got knocked down on the bottom of Lower Roads, and a friend of Carol's actually came out of our house, and she'd recorded it on her camera outside her house, and said that she would be my witness. And she knew the company. It was a contractor of BT, subcontractor of BT. So I was thinking they'd probably be the first people I would write to, seeing as they almost knocked me down in the middle of the bottom of St Anne's Road, right at that Blade Junction. So that was what sort of triggered the idea.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'm glad they didn't knock you down.
Yeah, it would have been pretty ironic, wouldn't it?
Chris, let's quickly
briefly,
meeting. Yeah.
Briefly, I would support what Amanda's volunteering to do. If she's willing to sit down for an hour and observe, draw up a list. I think businesses that have good drivers should be informed that they've got good drivers, and thank you very much, sort of as a general thing. So I would support that, even though I can't vote on a motion.
Okay, so I think we should note that, have you got this, Louise, that we as a committee want to write to badly behaved companies and support those that are observing the limit.
And on the person who nearly knocked me over, he wasn't speeding, he was doing 3 points, he was doing a UE, just to point that out.
So it was bad, yeah.
Bad driving, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to close the meeting now. The next meeting, according to my diary, will be on the 5th of November. So I don't know if we're going to have any fireworks at it, but we'll see. So 5th of November, and the meeting is going to be at 7 o'clock, I presume, Louise. Can I just ask, actually, because we now seem to be in a clash with the Neighbourhood Plan Committee, would it be possible for perhaps our chair and you and the chair of the Neighbourhood Plan Committee to see if there's any way of not having the meetings clash?
Yes, I think that's an additional meeting that they're having. It's not their usual regular meeting. We do have a meeting schedule, so they should be aware of our meeting. I will speak to the Deputy Town Clerk to make sure we don't clash in future.
Fine, okay. Chris, I'll let you have one last word.
It's on the timing that I noticed we've switched from 1930 to now. I've got in my diary 1900 for the next, right through to April, if that's the intention. I did observe that the website, Town Council website, has now been amended. It reads 1900. It's unfortunate that the newsletter that's just gone out has got an old timing, let's put it that way.
Yeah, okay. And in fact, Councillor Hook is to be commended for he was obviously reading the Town Council newsletter, because he was turning up at 7:30.
I cut it out and stuck it on my wall.
Right.
So, but I'll update it with a pen now. So it's 1900.
Fine, okay. Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for contributing to the meeting. I hope it's been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you at the meeting in a month's time. Okay. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.